Our guest today is Harold Albrecht. He is Member of Parliament for Kitchener-Conestoga. He'll share with us the tragic loss of his beloved wife of 36 years, whom he describes as his best friend. It happened right after his re-election win in May 2011. Just as he and Betty were headed to the victory party, Betty collapsed and passed away 2 days later of a spontaneous intracranial hemorrhage. Mr. Albrecht continued to live by his faith, and he's now a firm supporter of organ donation, as his wife saved 5 lives with her gift of life. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Christine. It's good to be here. I noticed one error in your introduction. We were married 39 years.
39. Hey, I went by a report, and that is, yes,
right.
Yes, I am amazed. I have to say off the bat, just looking at you, it's hard to imagine that you could have experienced such a profound loss just over a year ago.
Well, if you'd have told me 3 weeks in after losing Betty that I would be this far along in my journey, I wouldn't have believed you. I've always been amazed at the body's ability to heal, whether it's a broken bone or whatever. But at this point, I can say I'm amazed at how the spirit can also be healed.
I've read several public reports about the loss of your dear wife, Betty, and what comes across front and center, and there she is. What a beautiful picture that we see of you and her on your screen. One thing comes across so clear in all of these public reports is your love for her, the closeness that the two of you shared. I mean, she was your absolute best friend. She was the one that you've credited with where you were in life.
Absolutely. She was supportive of me in every phase of my life. When I was in dental school, she was working at Princess Margaret Hospital till I completed my dental education, all through dentistry and the various other extracurricular activities I engaged in, whether it was support for worldwide missions activities, going to developing countries, doing dentistry, serving on school board. She was always there, and she was not eager to be up front. She was more than happy to be in the background, but very supportive, absolutely.
Yet out of this terrible tragedy, and with you being a leader in our country as an MP, your faith shines. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the night of the incident, we were sitting in our home waiting for the results to come in from the early polls. And after about 8 or 9 polls had reported, it was clear that we were in the lead, so I said we might as well head down to the party. Our kids and grandkids had already left. We had all been together for dinner that evening, just had a great evening together. And as calmly as this, she said, "I'm getting a bad headache." And as she did that, she got up, took a few steps, and collapsed to the floor. And over the next 2 days, as we waited in hospital, talking to intensive care personnel, surgeons, and so on, it became obvious that there was no hope for Betty's life to continue. So then we discussed the issue of organ donation. And this is something we had talked about previously, so there was no question in my mind this was Betty's wish. Our children affirmed that unanimously. And in that process of 2 days, agreed to have 5 major organs donated. And we know that today that there are at least 5 people who are enjoying life as a result of those. So that brings a degree of comfort, a degree of healing. Obviously, my faith is the foundation for my healing journey. But knowing that 5 others continue to live, and being able now to promote actively, having people go online and register to be organ donors. Beadonor.ca, it's as simple as that. 2 minutes, beadonor.ca, register your intent, discuss it with your family. We'd all like to think we're going to live to be 90, and many of us will, but many of us won't, so it's important to have that discussion.
Grief is a process. It's an intense, personal, private process that differs from person to person. Faith is a critical part of your life and in your journey. Take us through this process.
Well, the night that Betty died, I came home. We brought all our grandchildren around us, and there was lots of tears, anguish. I don't think despair, but certainly grief. And after the children and grandchildren had all gone to bed, I sat down in the little chair that Betty always had her devotions in. So there beside the chair was a magazine rack with her Bible, a journal, and this book, A Grace Disguised. And I picked this book up. I had no idea that she had been reading it, and I read the back of it, and I thought to myself, there's someday I'm going to want to read that book.
Wow.
And about a week and a half later, I picked it up, started reading it, and literally once I started reading it, could not put it down. It's A Grace Disguised, written by Jerry Sitzer. I want to just read one short excerpt from it, because it's this little vignette that I come back to very frequently, probably daily, in fact, that has helped me through this journey. This gentleman lost his wife, his mother, and his daughter in the same car accident, and he's writing from the perspective of 3 years after the accident. I dreamed of a setting sun. I was frantically running west, trying desperately to catch it and remain in its fiery warmth and light, but I was losing the race. The sun was beating me to the horizon and was soon gone. I suddenly found myself in the twilight, exhausted. I stopped running and glanced with foreboding over my shoulder to the east. I saw a vast darkness closing in on me. I was terrified by that darkness. I wanted to keep running after the sun, though I knew it was futile, for it had already proven itself faster than I was. So I lost all hope, collapsed to the ground, and fell into despair. I thought at that moment that I would live in darkness forever. I felt absolute terror in my soul. A few days later, I talked about the dream with a cousin of mine who is a minister and a poet. He mentioned a poem by John Donne that turns on the point that though east and west seem farthest removed on a map, they eventually meet on a globe. What therefore appears as opposites, east and west, in time come together, if we follow one or the other long enough and far enough. Later, my sister Diane told me the quickest way for anyone to reach the sun and the light of day is not to run west, chasing after the sun, but to head east, plunging into the darkness until one comes to the sunrise. And that last sentence, Betty had highlighted. And when you think about the futility of chasing that sun on the best day of your life, realizing that it's futile, how much smarter it is to turn around and plunge into the darkness, it's brilliant. And I can say without question that the times that we have embraced that darkness, plunged into it, her birthday, for example, we went up to my son's place, we ordered pizza, we ordered a Dairy Queen ice cream cake, put a candle in it, stood around, hugging each other, crying and singing happy birthday to Betty. These are things that have enabled me to move forward in my life and have provided a degree of healing. I know I will see Betty again. I have never been more confident of the resurrection than I have in these past 15 months.
Harold, there's something that is critical about what you just shared and about that message you just read for everyone watching in that book, and that is that message of hope. The message of when a person is at that place where they feel perhaps that, and you might be feeling that way, that you just want to die, that there's no hope. In fact, there are people that are watching that with the messages that we hear today about euthanasia, about patient-assisted suicide, they want to die.
Right.
And you're also involved in palliative care. I mean, you are a person that you've embraced that darkness because of that hope that you hold on to inside.
Thanks, Christine. I'm so glad you mentioned that term hope because I often quote Margaret Somerville, a famous ethicist from the University of McGill. Yes, I've
met her.
And she says, quote, "Hope is the oxygen of the human spirit. Yes. Without it, the spirit dies." And I just love that quote because so often when we're in a situation like I'm in, or people have lost something, they're in that desperate situation. And without that hope, it's very difficult to go on. When my colleague Jack Layton passed away in Parliament, or he passed away, and then when we came back to the session in Parliament, a number of my colleagues used the term, "death shall have no dominion," quoting it to Dylan Thomas. And that's correctly attributed to him. But I pointed out to them that actually, that the origin of that phrase is in the scriptures, in Romans chapter 6, verse 9, where death shall have no dominion, and it's in the context of Christ's victory over death. So it's that hope that keeps me going.
And scripture, as a second part to that, also adds faith is the substance of things hoped for and not seen. At that point, when one is in the darkest place and they feel like they're just going to give up hope, you've seen this through, and you've seen that hope come to light.
I have, but I think it's important to point out to anybody who's watching, you can't put up a sheet of 4x8 plywood in a severe windstorm. You have to have that hope, that foundation in place before the crisis hits. I don't think I could have suddenly assembled all of the resources I needed to get through these past 15 months had I not had that foundation of faith in place. So I would just encourage people, take the time now to put that foundation in place. So when the storm comes, and it will, we're promised, in this world we're going to have trouble, but don't worry, I've overcome the world.
Now, We hear about the various strategies that people have in building that foundation. Many people awake 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock, they read the gospel, they get filled with that word every day. Others just silently throughout the day talk to the Lord. What are some of your methods of building that foundation?
Well, for me, it's probably a combination of all of the above. I do try to read the scriptures on a regular basis. In fact, I often take the book of Proverbs and take one chapter a day. So there's 31 days in a month. So that gets me one day per month. There's incredible wisdom there. But then to supplement it with some of the New Testament scriptures. There's a verse in Peter, 2 Peter, where Peter says that, don't forget, 1,000 years is as one day, and one day as 1,000 years. Well, I did a little math on that, and I found out that if I live to be 93, I have 45 more minutes to go. And I can handle 45 more minutes. That puts it in context of the eternal perspective for me. And I got to keep reminding myself, yes, these are momentary troubles. They're difficult. We have challenges. But with my faith and the confidence that Christ has won the victory, I am confident of my victory as well.
How has your whole family come together in the middle of this?
I could not be more proud of my kids, 3 adult children, and their spouses and my grandchildren. They've been an incredible source of support for me and are doing very well. Obviously, we grieve. We still have lots of tears. But we also recognize that we have a hope. My colleagues in Parliament have been incredibly supportive of me, including the Prime Minister. I can't go a day without someone asking me, Harold, how are you doing? And that's incredibly supportive. My church family's been there for me. My own constituency, Kitchener-Conestoga residents, hundreds of cards and emails and notes, and continuing today, personal questions of how are you doing? And at a time like this, it is so critical that we just take that moment, whether it's just a little question like that. But to assume that the person who's had a loss doesn't want to talk about it, I think is a wrong assumption.
That's a big mistake.
Yeah, the moment that door is opened, allowing us to speak about it, to speak with love and good memories is a major, major part of my healing journey.
Another very important concept that you talk about here is reaching out. I mean, Christ had a ministry among the people. We can't exist in isolation, and I think it's a very strong message that you send here.
Thank you. Well, there's no question that my church family and my biological family, in addition to the broader community, has been my source of it's the building on that foundation, if I could use that terminology. Certainly the foundation is crucial, but then to have people come around you, as the little guy who was crying in the thunderstorm said, I want somebody here with skin on. I know God's here, but I want somebody with skin on. And sometimes we just need that personal touch, someone that cares.
Well, Harold, I want to congratulate you, and I want to thank you for coming our way and blessing us, because you are a living example of the way the Lord moves in someone's life when it comes to hope and going on to face the future.
It's been an honor to be here, and if it's helpful to one person, the story that I've shared, that's what I want it to be. I want them to also be free to go onto my website and find copies of the report that we did on palliative care and suicide prevention. There's all kinds of resources there that they could access.
Well,
so
Harold,
thank you again.
We need leaders like you. I want to
thank you so much
once again.